Creepy Strange Glitches in the Matrix. Part 11. Less than a year later, the next part is here. I thank everyone for their support, for their kind words, for donations. Brew coffee, tea, and we begin. The second daughter disappeared. I have a cousin who has been married to his wife for 20 years. Years ago, I went to a family reunion where he, his wife, and their 2 daughters came. At one point, I stayed in the house to look after the children. While all the other adults were busy, my children were also there. My cousin's daughters were named Hannah and Haley. At that time, sometimes I spent time with them, took them fishing, and so on. My daughter remembers both of them. About 2 years later, I saw a post on Facebook that they took Hannah to Disneyland. I was confused, because I wondered why they didn't take me. Haley? It was strange because in all their photos they were always together. Hannah and Haley. There were many posts with their daughters on their page. Naturally, I asked about Hale, and both of them, my cousin and his wife, stated that they didn't have any daughter named Haley. But I even remember talking to them about the correct spelling of their second daughter's name. When I looked into my photos in Google to see if I could find photos of Haley, and they weren't there. My daughter also had pictures of her in phone. And when I asked her to find them, she was shocked because those photos just disappeared. That is, themselves. The photos remained, but Haley was not there. No one else in the family remembers her. I looked at literally all of our family photos. There was my cousin, his wife, our aunts, uncles, and so on. But only Haley wasn't on them. It was as if someone had removed it from all the pictures with the help of Photoshop. Was in a complete stupor. What happened to Hale? How this girl I remember, with whom we fished together, did not exists. I even started asking different members of our family if they knew a child named Haley, because I thought that maybe she was someone else's child. But no one knows a girl with that name. And even my mother says she doesn't know any Haley. What the hell changed? To answer some questions, I noticed this about 5 years ago. I studied everything carefully. I Googled literally everything and everyone who was associated with this family. I found other girls with the same name, but none of them were hers. I looked through all the old photos. I was convinced that something had happened to her, but no one understood what I was talking about. I asked almost all my relatives about it. My daughter remembered that she had a whole bunch of selfies with Haley, because once they spent a couple of nights in a tent in nature. She disappeared from all photographs, even the one that, when I was photographing my great-aunt with her granddaughters, my cousin's wife had a few unsuccessful childbirth. After Hannah was born, she said that was why they only had one child. Maybe Haley was a ghost. The sky went out last night. My neighbor also saw it. I saw it last night, and since then I have been wondering about the reality of our existence. My neighbor also saw it with me, so I know it was reality. We watched the satellite fly across the sky right next to the third star on the handle of the Big Bear. The satellite flew past, and a second later the inexplicable happened. The sky seemed to darken for a few seconds, and then it seemed to become pixelated. The whole sky began to look like some kind of strange pattern, as if there was a whole bunch of iridescent squares in the sky. Of course I thought my eyes were deceiving me, but then my neighbor exclaimed, "Dude, did you see that?" The hairs on my body stood on end. I was shocked, and, to be honest, even now I am in a slight shock. We are in some kind of simulation. What happened to us? Music. I can't explain and understand what we saw last night, so I'm here. Please enlighten me. I watched my death from the corner of the room. It happened last year, but it still doesn't work out for me. I was in the hospital after a routine operation. Nothing much. They just removed the gallbladder. Everything had to be done. Go smoothly. I woke up in my bunk feeling good. But after about an hour, I suddenly felt very cold. I felt dizzy, and my heart seemed to jump out of my chest. I told the nurse that something was wrong, and this, the last thing I remember. Further, I remember watching everything that was happening, as if standing in the corner of the room. I've seen how he was lying on the bed, pale as a corpse, as several nurses ran in. A signal is triggered for doctors. One of the nurses began to give me indirect heart massage. The other called the resuscitation team. I remember thinking, damn, I'm dying. But there was no panic. I felt strangely calm, detached, as if it wasn't me, but just my shell. I heard them shouting numbers, shouting my name, and even shouting something like, "We're losing him." But I just watched. I even looked at my hands and realized that I didn't have them. I was just a floating consciousness, as if it was a very vivid dream, the most realistic in my life. And then everything became even stranger. I felt a very strange attraction. It's not like someone grabbed me. It's more like gravity has started to act in a different direction. As if I'm about to pull you up somewhere, I don't know where. And right before it happened, I heard in my head completely. A calm voice. Still early. The next thing I remember, I woke up abruptly with a smear on my face, gasping as if underwater. My chest hurt like hell from the compressions. It turned out that I had been lying dead for almost 2 minutes. The heart was completely stopped for this period of time. But somehow I came back. I didn't tell people what I saw, at least not at first. But I tell you, in those 2 minutes I was more alive than I had ever been in my life. And whatever I was, it wasn't nothing. It was definitely not a dream. I know what I saw. My sister returned home. I would like to start with the fact that in my parents' house there has been a strange events. A few years ago, when I was still living there, I was with my mother in her bedroom. We heard my sister returns home. You see, she always came home like this. First, she parked her car. Second, opens a metal gate. Third, opens and slams the front door. Fourth, he throws his keys on the counter. Fifth, runs to the bathroom. Sixth, comes to our mother's room. My parents and I hear my sister coming back home. I even said, "Oh, your daughter is here." I was always annoyed by how loudly she did all this. We all waited, when she's already in the room. A few minutes passed, but she still didn't come in, so I went to see where she was. First, her dog was waiting as usual at the entrance to the bathroom. The lights were off and the door was slightly ajar. I was standing there. I didn't hear anything, so I knocked on the bathroom door several times. There was no answer. I got worried and opened the door, but it wasn't there. Second, I went to the kitchen. Her keys were not on the counter. Third, I continued to inspect the house. Input: the door was locked. Fourth, I went outside. The gate was closed, and there were no traces of her car anywhere. I returned to room to my mother. I don't know what my face looked like, but she immediately asked, "What happened?" Called my sister. She was still at work and had to come back late. The fact is that something like this happened a few weeks ago. My sister now has a daughter. She is almost 3 years old. She and her daughter were sitting in one room, and then they heard our mother coming home. My niece even shouted, "Grandma!" Music to wait for the grandmother to come to them. My sister did the same thing I did. She looked around the house and then I called my mother. Needless to say, our mother did not return home at that moment. Most of all, it's surprising that even my sister's dog heard her come home and dutifully waited for her at the entrance to the bathroom. Although there was no one there, she opened the door to my husband, who was literally frozen in time. It happened last weekend. I was on kitchen with children, and my husband was repairing his car on the street. I heard a knock on the garage door leading into the house. I looked around and saw that the door was locked. Of course, I decided that it was my husband trying to enter. I opened the door for him and saw that he was just standing still and smiling and holding some tools in his hands. This is where the strangeness begins. I expected him to come in or he would say something, but he was just standing still. I was busy with something, so I said, "Are you going or not?" Answered. And a few seconds passed, so I closed the door and left, thinking that he was trying to play a joke on me. About a minute later, he opens the door and enters. So I tell him, "What the hell was that? Why are you just stood there and didn't say anything?" He swore that it couldn't be because all this time he had been busy and hasn't tried to enter the house until this point. I got angry and told him that if he was bullying me, it's not funny. But he swore again that he hadn't knocked or come to that door at all. He is still sure that I had hallucinations. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. Maybe it's easy. A glitch in time. A dream? Although it was noon, I was definitely awake. I walked around and was busy with my own business. Maybe he somehow lost consciousness and then he came over and knocked, but he didn't remember it. I don't know how to explain it, but it's really creepy. He could have had a small stroke or seizure. The same thing happened to my father when we were in the car, standing at a traffic light. He seemed to sit there for a whole minute, staring in front of him. Holding on to the steering wheel, he did not react to anything. His body and face were absolutely motionless. Then he returned to normal as if nothing had happened. In general, strangely, a month later he had a full-fledged stroke, but he recovered. I advise you to show your husband to the doctor. The stairs led me to a place that was not part of our home. This incident still scares me. I'm 22 now, but I remember this incident so well that I remember it better than most of the things in my life. This happened when I was about 17. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't sleepwalking. I was fully conscious at that time. I went to visit my aunt. She lives in an old state apartment building. There are a whole bunch of such houses in our area. And all of them, same. They have 5 or 6 floors, all with the same old concrete walls and stairs. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. I was sitting at her house, and at some point she told me that they had a newborn puppies appeared. I decided to go down to look at them. I looked at the puppies and decided to go back to my aunt. I went up to what seemed to me to be the 3rd floor, but there were no doors there. Along all, there were only bare walls of staircases. There were no markings or floor numbers, just the same ones. Repetitive walls and stairs. I kept going up, and I could tell for sure that I had climbed much further. Of the 3rd floor, and then suddenly I reached the last floor. Instead of the usual floor and doors, I saw something similar to school corridor. But not a corridor, not like we have in India. It was like some Western American. A school hallway, long and lined with lockers, just like in American high school movies. It was brightly lit and completely unfamiliar to me. There were students walking along the corridor who were definitely non-locals. They walked as if everything was perfect for them. That's all right. I just stood there on the stairs, stunned, staring at it all, wondering what they were. Here they do, and why there is something in this super old building that looks so clean and good. I remember very well how a young black girl looked at me from the corridor and waved at me. She smiled as if she recognized me, as if I was in my place. I didn't answer her. I just froze. Then I slowly turned around and went down the stairs. As I began to descend, the old building seemed to be back in place. Markings have also appeared. Floors and doors along a flight of stairs and everything else. I went down another floor and found myself on an acquaintance floor on the 3rd floor. Everything around was completely normal. Because of my confusion, I went upstairs again to make sure I wasn't going crazy. But this time, the next floors were the most ordinary floors in such panels. No hallway, no lockers, no students, no girl waving at me. I asked my aunt if there was any school nearby, or if there was one in the building. Repaired part. She had no idea what I was talking about, and said that nothing like this had ever happened here. She decided that I was dreaming of Eve. But I know that this is not so. It was definitely not a dream. Everything seemed too real. The lights, the walls, the people, the way that girl looked at me. It was all very real. I still remember every detail. I had dreams. I had hallucinations, but this wasn't one of them. Felt like I fell into a different version of reality for a few minutes. I don't have an explanation for this, but it definitely happened. Since then, I can't forget that incident. I didn't have the courage to discuss it with anyone, as I would just be considered for a madman. It was a time shift. Something else has seeped into our dimension. Maybe the liminal has opened up. Space or something. If anyone has experienced this, please respond. I'm not crazy. I don't have any diagnosis or anything. I have an ordinary full life and I have a job. A book that disappeared and reappeared with a note I didn't write. It happened yesterday, and I'm still in shock. I am an amateur writer. I have a battered copy of Stephen King's book on writing that I keep since college. I quoted a line from it to a pen pal, but I couldn't remember the exact wording. I went to the bookshelf, pulled out a book and found the right page. I left the book open on the coffee table and I went to the kitchen for a drink. I was gone probably for a second and a half. When I returned, the book was gone. Neither. Table, not on the floor, nowhere. I live alone. I rummaged through the entire apartment in search. No problem. Disappointed. I gave up and decided to take a walk to clear my head. When I returned an hour later, I found that the book was lying exactly in the center of the coffee table. Closed. My heart. It began to beat up. I opened the book. It opened up just on the page I was looking for initially. And there, in the margins next to the paragraph, in a blue pen, almost in the same handwriting as mine, was written, "You already know this." I never write notes in the margins of books. Never. And it was definitely not me who wrote it. I think I visited a gas station that was from the future of an alternate universe. In February 2022, I was driving in the Midwest of the United States. I don't know if I can describe exactly where it was, but I drove up to the outskirts of a large city in Ageu around 2 a.m. The cigarettes ran out, the gas was almost gone, and it was still about 3 hours to get home. The maps showed that the next gas station was open at the tourist center on the other side of the city. Level sensor. Fuel informed me that there was barely enough gasoline to get there. Therefore, I try to go as much as possible. More economical. And then I pull up to a well-lit Speedway gas station. It was open, visible from the freeway. I drive up to the gas station. I was there alone. The column doesn't accept my credit card and gives me an error every time I enter my zip code. Okay, I think it's the card reader. I go inside to pay and decide to buy cigarettes as well. I tell the seller the brand. Cigarettes, but he seems to know what cigarettes I need. I didn't even have time to finish, he had already taken the right cigarettes. Then he says, "I thought you were throwing it," as if it were a joke. My tired brain did not pay much attention to his words. Cashiers in other stores where I regularly buy cigarettes know which brands I like the most and recognize me. And I, as a woman with a baby face, get a lot of comments, jokes that I should quit smoking. Therefore, I did not pay attention to it until I realized that I had never stopped at this gas station before. Kasira recognized. In general, I'm trying to pay for gas. The card is rejected again. I pay in cash and go out. I didn't pay much attention to anything, except that I thought, strange. This cashier must have worked at another gas station where I had seen him before, and assumed that the card was temporarily blocked due to the fact that the device often rejected it or something like that. In 2022, I rode this route 2 or 3 more times. One day I ran out of gas in almost the same place as then, and I remembered that highway and the speed gas station. But when I drove up to the exit, this time in the afternoon, there was no gas station in that place, and no gas stations were visible from the highway in principle. I suppose I made a mistake. It was daytime, so I drove into the nearest open gas station at the next exit. And then in 2023, I moved to the city, near which there was a mysterious gas station. And once in a while I'd pass by that exit. And I always remembered such moments. I swear, there used to be a gas station here, although the place for it was very strange. Usually, there are no gas stations in such places. This spring, they began to build a gas station in this very place. Speedway. It looks exactly like in my memories. I can't help but wonder if I somehow got into the future at that moment. I think I couldn't pay with the card because in the future I moved, and my zip code changed. I hope that in the near future I will quit smoking. But during my visit to the gas station I bought cigarettes and a cashier said to me, "I thought you were going to quit." I'm a little scared to go to that gas station now, but at the same time, I really want time. Either way, it's like a sign from the universe to quit smoking. So maybe I'll just do it and never go back there again. My girlfriend returned home, but she was nowhere to be found. So, I haven't had stories like this before, Saba, but now there is. And to be honest, I'm still a little shocked by it. So, my girlfriend works 5 hours. Shifts in a nursing home. Today from 7 to 12 p.m. And today she wrote to me that she works double shift, which, to be honest, was quite normal. I was sitting at my computer and eating lunch in my office at about 12:15 p.m. When I suddenly heard the office door open, I flinched and turned around. I saw my girlfriend standing in the doorway. She let out a short cry, as if she wanted to scare me. She usually did this to make a joke and then went into the bedroom apparently to change. I went back to the computer to finish my lunch and just sat there waiting for her to return. But it did not appear. I thought she was still in the bedroom, but the bedroom door was open and the room was empty. I went around the whole house and did not find it. I thought she might have just gone to the bathroom or something. Therefore, not much about it. Worried. About 10 more minutes passed, and there was still no sound in the house, so I checked the house again, but her. Nowhere to be found. I check outside. Her car isn't there, so I thought she came home from work, and then I went to the second shift. I texted her asking if she was working the second shift. She said, yes, and I said that it was a little strange of her to come home and leave right away, because she had never did. She replied that she did not understand what I was talking about. I said that she had just come home and surprised me with most, but she said that she was at work all day. She swore and swore that she did not return home. My girlfriend takes her job very seriously. The way home from work took her a very long time. She would not have made it to the second shift on time. So now I wonder if her doppelganger came to my office or if I'm just going crazy. This is what we call these in Finland. This is considered a neutral phenomenon that is not worth worrying about. Personally, I think that such an event is a small problem. Alternative timelines. In this case, it is a problem of the reality where your girlfriend returned home early. Where did my friend go? A few months ago, I got a new job. I met David and we immediately found lingua franca. He showed me the office, helped me when I had a lot of questions related to the fact that I was a beginner, and then we started having lunch together. This part will play a role in the future. I've seen his face many, many times. I have good eyesight and so on. I remember his face very clearly. He sat in my office many times when I had free time. We often chatted with each other. All this lasted 1 week. Next week at my door, a guy appeared, delighted to see me, and asked how my weekend had gone. I didn't recognize him and I should be. I looked embarrassed because I could see from him how glad he was to see me, as if I was a good friend of his. I almost asked if I knew him, but I was too embarrassed to do so. Figured it was someone who I briefly met last week. I stopped by David's office on my lunch break to ask him about that new colleague who greeted me happily in the morning. But instead of David, I found the same colleague who sat in David's chair and acted as if he belonged there. On the table there was a sign with the name and surname. David. I behaved at ease, trying not to look confused again. He just talked a little and left, scratching his head, so to speak. At the meeting of the employee, everyone called him Colleague David, and he behaved as if he had always been David. I swear on my life this is not the person I am. I met my first week. David had brown eyes, brown hair, and was thin. This guy has blue eyes and he's pretty stocky. The hair color is the same, but the styling is different. Even their style of clothing is different. I was so perplexed that I even closely studied his miniature photo on the avatar in the email, looking for at least some trace of the old David. The new David only greets me in passing, but nothing more. He did not. Comes to my office during breaks and does not communicate with me, except for a polite hello in the morning. I blame him because, from his point of view, I don't seem to be very happy to see him. I really want to tell someone, because I'm completely confused. But who can I tell without looking crazy? I didn't hit my head in. Recently, he did not use anything and did not take any medications. I don't drink or smoke. I am healthy and in good shape a little over 30. I have no other explanation for this. I'm in shock and I'm still trying to figure it out. Everything else on the work and at home is completely normal. I can clearly see old David's face in my mind when I think of him. I don't understand how one person just replaced another. And no one except me seems to notice this case. The strangest thing that ever happened to me. I firmly believe that the new David is not the person I am with. I made friends in the first week. Thoughts? Something similar happened to me. I interviewed one person and it went great. And then, we talked for an hour, found a common language and had a great time. A few other employees, after hearing how well we spend time joking and laughing, discussing something interesting, even coming to my office to introduce ourselves to a potential colleague. After he passed the background check and was hired, the person who came to work in the first day was no longer the person I had spoken to earlier. He looked different, wasn't as cheerful and pleasant as before. He was a completely different person. He even looked much older. Other employees who we met him at an interview less than a week ago, they even said that he was not the same person. It was more than 10 years ago. And I swear another person came in for an interview, got a job, and then someone was sent in. Another. It seems to me that we were simply deceived, but I cannot prove it. Did anyone else have this strange glitch? I'm not sure which subreddit my post can be attributed to, but I think that the sticks in the matrix are the most suitable place. I work in customer service where there is a need for practical interaction and a lot of consultations. Case 1. I consulted 2 young people on about one product, and while one of them was reading the price list, he muttered to his friend, "Wow, the prices are not cheap," to which I replied, "Yes, but all products of this quality as a rule have a markup." The man looked at. I replied that I didn't, but I had. Close friends are Greeks. Really? How did you understand what I was saying? They looked at each other as if they had been caught. And now I looked at them with surprised eyes. I thought these guys were just deceiving me. Case 2. After 2 weeks after the first incident, I served 2 Chinese women, an elderly mother and her daughter. An elderly woman said, only in Mandarin, and my daughter, although with difficulty, could communicate in basic English. Music at some point. An elderly woman tells her daughter that she likes the color red, and I reflexively agree. Yes, this color suits you more than others. Before I knew it, this woman didn't speak English at all. Her daughter breaks into a wide smile and asks, "Can you speak Mandarin? I don't understand what happened." Somebody, have you had another similar experience? For a moment, everyone disappeared. It happened to me just a few minutes ago, and I still feel weird. Returning home, getting off the bus, I called my mother to warn her about my arrival. I've heard her brothers and father are watching football, and she is cooking dinner. There are people around me in the bar, people walking down the street. No problem. Special. After 5 minutes, I returned home and, as always, shouted loudly, "Hello everyone," but no one answered. I thought, well, maybe they didn't hear me, and went to look for my relatives. The TV was on. Someone was watching football, but the living room was empty. The kitchen was empty, but the lights were on. The light was also on in the bathroom, but it was also empty. I looked everywhere, in every room, and began to get lost in guesses. But I don't know, maybe they went to my grandmother for another floor. I don't know. I swear. There was no one in the house except me and our pets. The Crampons were there. When I entered our balcony, everything became even stranger. The street was empty. Only crickets and animal sounds were heard. No cars, no people. The bar was open, but on the terrace I didn't see anyone, although several large companies were sitting at the tables outside. As I passed by, it became creepy. I went to my room because I was still wearing my backpack and I wanted to take it off. At that moment to be honest, I have already begun to worry. And then suddenly my mother appeared on the threshold of my room with a surprised look. The conversation was something like this. She, "Are you already here? I didn't hear you come in." Me, "Where have you all been? There was no one here." She, "What do you mean? We didn't go anywhere." I'm loud. I said hello when I entered, but there was no one at home. She said, Weird. Maybe we didn't hear you?" We looked at each other in complete bewilderment, but she changed the subject, and I said nothing more. And yes, my father and brothers watched football in the living room, sitting on the sofa, as if they had never gone anywhere. Both cars and people on the street returned. Well, it was as usual. And no, if the family came home, I would see it because my room is right at the entrance to the apartment. I just don't have an explanation for that. But for a moment I was really scared. And that silence, man. The missing drawer was found 12 years later on the street. This is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. About 16 or 17 years ago, we bought a desk with a large drawer. He was the pride and joy of my wife. And when he passed, about a year after the purchase of the table, robbers broke into us. As they ran away, they jumped out the window, scratching this table and drawer. This is an important part. We moved to another house in city, and the drawer of the table stood in the warehouse about 4 years old. When we decided to pick it up from the warehouse, the box was not there. That was about 12 years ago. For the last 12 years, I have literally constantly heard from my wife that we lost this box because of me, that it was my fault, what a pity, it was such a good box, and so on. Let's go back to last weekend. We went to the city on business for a few days. We were a few blocks from home, and suddenly a question arose in my head. What happened to our box? I thought, no, again, just forget him already. Literally a minute later, I saw a black drawer of the table. He was standing against the wall of the house. It was in Germany, and people, if they want to get rid of old furniture, usually leave it outside by the wall of the house so that someone can take it away. My wife and I looked at each other and thought, what the hell? As we got closer, we thought, oh my God, he's even wearing the same ones. Scratches. No way. We were shocked. We took our box and carried it home. To our utter amazement, it fit perfectly into our desk. Our damn desk drawer ended up on the street a few years away, blocks from where we lived about 12 years later. The probability that someone has kept it for so long, and then I decided to throw it away on the very evening when we passed by 12 years later. It's just amazing. We have no idea. We have how, where, and why it disappeared. But after all these years, we are finally reunited. Can anyone calculate the probability of this coincidence? The universe is like, oh my God, will she shut up about this box or not? Here you go. And thank you all for watching. In the comments, of course, share your stories about glitches in the Matrix. Don't forget that I have a cart. Link in the description. See the other parts if you haven't seen it yet. Don't get sick. Good luck and bye-bye.